erhält das Wort.
And now for the EPP, Mr. Hulveni. 1.5 minutes.
Tisztelt biztos asszony!
Madam Commissioner, honourable members, I would like to acknowledge the excellent work of Ms. Zakharopoulou, who, as rapporteur for this draft resolution, did her best to find consensus between the political groups. EU-Africa cooperation must be based on mutual respect. We must stop patronizing our African partners. And we must consider local specificities and sensitivities in policymaking. This draft resolution underlines the significance of education, security, and religious partners. I believe that Africa's economic problems require local solutions, and the best way to help them is through quality education, which is key to job creation and economic development. However, there can be no economic development without security. Our partnership must prioritize security cooperation and the fight against terrorism. A weakness of this draft resolution is that it does not pay enough attention to local specificities. Sexual rights are misinterpreted, suggesting anti-life messages, and also there are references to the Migration Compact not supported by all member states. The number one resource of Africa is young people. Let them find their future in their own continent. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner.
Thank you. Mr. Zorrinho, 1.5 minutes.
Senhora Presidente, Senhora...
Madam President, Commissioner, the EU and the African Union, they both share a commitment to a fair multilateral globalization. This report reinforces that vision and positions the European Parliament as a key player in defining the partnership between equals, which we want to establish at the EU-Africa Summit. Europe and Africa must free themselves from the donor-beneficiary relationship, creating conditions for the two continents to cooperate not only as equals in will and sovereignty, but also in objective conditions of training and qualification. This intention is reflected in the partnerships in the strategy. Partnerships for environmental transition, access to energy, digital transformation, sustainable growth, jobs, peace and governance, and also migration and mobility. This is also reflected in the principle that political and economic relations must be based on equality and the sharing of values such as respect for the rule of law, democracy and human rights, and a genuine desire to build lasting relationships that benefit both Africa and the EU. I'd like to thank the rapporteur and the shadows for this report. I think we've got to a broad consensus that traces a path of decency and dignity in international relations. And it bets on a multilateral, equal partnership for a better future for people in Africa and Europe.
Für die SND-Fraktion.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to say that Mr. Zorrinho was speaking on behalf of the S&D group. For Renew, Mr. Etienne.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, verehrte...
Thank you, Madam. Well, first of all, many thanks to the rapporteur because Chrysoula Zakharopoulou, with this report, has achieved something which doesn't happen very often here, and that is that she has created great unity in this House for a new partnership between the EU and Africa, a partnership which will overcome the post-colonial time and which will be on an equal footing. In the centre of this report, we say that we want this partnership to be on an equal footing, and what's happening with COVAX is that partnership on an equal footing where we take responsibility in the EU, and together with the African partners we support them in this pandemic which hits the weakest most. In this partnership we focus on education, women, young people, ladies and gentlemen. And I think we are well advised to do that, because that is the future. I'm sure the speaker following me will say something different, but the strategy is, he will say that the strategy is there to bring millions of Africans to Europe. That's not true. Of course, we need to improve what we do, how we bring people back to their countries if they have no right to asylum. But we have a humanitarian responsibility towards the vulnerable groups from Africa. We have a responsibility to define how migration can be defined for our labour markets and decide who can come and work on our continent. These are very important subjects that need to be discussed. We need a joint strategy there with our African partners. We're not just going to throw the doors wide open and say everyone come to us. Thank you.
Next up.
Thank you. Mr. Zimniok for 1 minute.
Möglicherweise bin
You are a dreamer. You're a dreamer. The EU Africa strategy is a neo-colonial project. The main problem of Africa hasn't actually been dealt with. There's no single word about overpopulation in Africa. Nothing about that in the whole document. The demographic problem can't be dealt with just through family policy. It's been criticised, and illegal immigration is going to be legalised, and we're going to see mostly unqualified migrants coming in. Since 2015, we've seen what's happened, especially in Germany. We've seen immigration that doesn't provide any use to our society. These migrants are sending a lot of money back to Africa, and that means that overpopulation in Africa isn't dealt with. It's just strengthened. European citizens, are we going to be asked to support this rubbish? No. We would reject this. One thing is certain, though. You can't help Africa if you destroy your own continent. Thank you.
Nächste Rednerin ist
Next, Ms. Herzberger for Fana for 2 minutes.
Ich bin so klein. Merci. Merci beaucoup, Madame le.
Thank you, Rapporteur. Thank you, Commissioner. The new EU strategy for Africa opens up a new door and a new vision, a new potential, because we remain convinced that a respectful and transparent dialogue between European and African partners will be a source for new and fair synergies. This report focuses on the capital importance of the partnership with Africa. In agreement with our partners, we would like to give priority to the fight against poverty and corruption, human rights, social inequalities, defence of democracy, and rule of law, and also access to fundamental needs, to health, to food security, education, and preservation of the environment. Also to eradication of forced child labour, youth unemployment and exploitation of girls and women. So far we've received encouraging results. The main objective of the report is to guarantee a partnership on an equal footing in order to emerge from the donor-beneficiary relationship. We can only get that if we have a critical approach. We've seen notary success in agriculture and trade in order to promote sustainable and inclusive development. Here we need to continue to reduce systemic dependence on foreign imports, stimulate internal trade, encourage regional integration of the African continent. However, on the digitalization strategy, we should not impose our approach on African countries because they are confronting many challenges. How can you have the internet if you don't have access to electricity or primary health care? So we need to continue to work towards an effective and fair partnership which will enable us to achieve sustainable and inclusive development. Thank you.
Als nächstes spricht die Kollegin Kemper für eine Minute.
And now Ms. Kemper for 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Bardzo dziękuję pani sprawozdawczyni za olbrzymią pracę. Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you so much, the rapporteur, for your great work, and thank you, Commissioner. Europe today is showing that it is a true ally of Africa, and I think this is the right moment to try to see what we have done and how engaged we were in the region, and also to suggest changes. And it's good to do so, because these changes show us that we should help there. And everything that in the report concentrates on digitalization, economic growth, sustainable development, equality, this all shows us that young people in Africa, as Madam Commissioner said, this human capital, these young people, this is what is the most important element, and this is where we should be focusing on, because the EU is the biggest donor, and we should talk about it. So this human capital, the investment in young human capital, may cause them to reach their dreams there where they have been born, and maybe come to Europe as tourists or maybe tell us more about their great continent. And this is the path that we should take. This is what we support. What is the biggest challenge today is health. Africa needs huge support when it comes to healthcare. And this is really a great challenge for us also. And I think we have all the possibilities, all the capabilities. COVAX shows us the way, and I think this is a very, very good idea. The only thing I cannot agree with is the ideology. Reproductive, sexual and reproductive health. This is not something that we would agree with. I think here we should support those girls who suffer from mutilation or who are forced to being married too early. So this is where we should go. The rest is great. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. Now we have Mr. Urban Crespo. 1.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Commissioner, from the European left, we feel that this report contains some positive recommendations, especially when it comes to development, agriculture, and the environment. However, we think that it doesn't change much when it comes to immigration and trade, and this is one of the main points for us, it introduces very problematic elements when it comes to military cooperation and Euro-African security. This is why, even though we understand that there should be a strategy for Africa, as a group we will abstain, because we need a strategy which updates and refines European relations with Africa, but these relations should be focused on rights and social justice as well as climate justice. We also need to point towards the causes of poverty and inequality that African peoples suffer. So this is something that cannot be done if we continue with our neo-colonial activities to just extract resources. European policies of development cooperation are ever more subordinate to other interests that do nothing to do away with poverty. It just has to do with migration control, setting up borders, and the financial interest of European companies. A real strategy for Africa should start by freeing the patents for COVID vaccines, by canceling illegitimate debt, and by changing the unfair trade practices which prevent Africa from developing its own productivity. Otherwise, what we are doing is called neocolonialism, and you cannot count on us.
Schön, nächster Redner.
Thank you much indeed. Mr. Korsha, 1 minute, please.
Thank you. We need to stop migration by dealing with the root causes. We need economic development, job creation, and providing decent living conditions in Africa. So we need to reset the EU's Africa policies, especially with regard to sub-Saharan Africa. We can only claim to be successful if we have remedied the root causes of migration. Lack of security, lack of food security, lack of employment, investment, and education opportunities. It is my conviction that when we embark on international development projects in sub-Saharan Africa, we need to take traditional African knowledge into account to a greater extent than we are doing it today. If we really think that Africa is important to us, then let us avoid ideological approaches. Let's be pragmatic in constructing our relationship. Let us bring help to Africa, because the stability of Europe begins in Africa. Thank you.
Paljon kiitoksia, kollega Adam Kosa. Ja...
Thank you much indeed, Mr. Korsha. Now we have Mrs. Bentele. 1 minute, please. Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues, the EU and Africa have to work closer together strategically because we have huge challenges. Huge increase in young people in Africa. Therefore, we need to create millions of new jobs. There's not enough investment. There's not enough support for taxes. China is increasing its role in Africa, and as far as biodiversity and climate change is concerned, there'll be huge changes there in Africa will affect the world. Various conflicts, terror have left millions of people without any hope. In the new EU-Africa cooperation, I would say we are an expert in the EU as far as the internal market is concerned. We know how we create wealth. Therefore, we can share our knowledge with Africa. Secondly, for climate goals, for sustainable development, we need new EU-Africa energy partnerships, digital partnerships. Thirdly, we need real partnerships. We need to start building contacts, cultural, and we need to further intensify these.
Kiitos, kollega Bentele. Ja...
Thank you much indeed, Ms. Bentele. Now we have Ms. Arena. 1 minute, please.
L'Afrique.
Africa is a continent where the population is among the poorest in the world, but Africa is also undeniably the richest in the world when it comes to natural resources. Diamonds, gold, cobalt, cocoa, just to name a few. These primary resources would bring the world to a standstill if we didn't have access to it. 80% of the electricity produced in France stems from uranium mined in Niger. Since decolonization, most former colonizers have been emptying these countries at the detriment of their population to fill European pockets. And they don't pay much to these local populations. They exploit this low-skilled, low-paid labor with no proper payment of taxes, and there are no environmental rules to speak of. This leads to failed states, which are often corrupt and more, whose leaders are more concerned by their well-being than by helping their own people. Global warming caused by our models of production is yet another piece of this pie. So we need a new EU-Africa strategy, but this strategy needs to impose a social and an environmental strategy to companies. We need to fight against corruption. We need to change our production model, and we also need to include civil society, women and young people, much more than we do now. Thank you.
Kiitokset, kollega Maria Arena.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Arena. It is quite late, and therefore I will ask you to stick to your speaking time. Now we have Mrs. Rodriguez Ramos. You have 1 minute.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam. 14.4 kilometers is the distance between Africa and Europe. Whatever happens in Africa only happens at 14.4 kilometers. So helping Africa is helping ourselves. Achieving climate change objectives, fight against poverty, equality, will only manage that if we're all on board together. That's why this strategy is a great opportunity to make this partnership different, on an equal footing, as has been said, getting out of the donor-recipient relationship, because Africa is the continent that has the greatest poverty, it has instability, violence, but it's also the continent that has doubled its GDP over 12 years. It's the continent that has gone from having no telephones to being connected with mobile telephones. So we need to have that equal partnership. Thank you, Crisula, and thank you to the Commission for your commitment.
Kiitokset, kollega Rodriguez Ramos.
Thank you much indeed, Mrs. Rodriguez Ramos. Now we will move to the next speaker, Dominique Bilde. 1 minute, please.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you much indeed, Madam President. We see doublespeak here in this report. We're being asked here for legal immigration, to legalize people coming in clandestinely. With 25 billion aid given to Africa in 2018, Europeans is supposed to ask for access to allow repatriation from their nationals. From the Commission, as far as the 6 countries that haven't sent enough back, we have 5 from Africa. Transfers of monies from immigrants back to their home countries, that represents 3 times as much as humanitarian aid. We see 3.7% of Africa's GDP from these illegal flows of money. We can see, therefore, that a huge amount of monies aren't being used properly. After COVID, Europe and the West, we cannot hold everybody else up in the world without any results on the other hand.
Kiitokset kollega Bilde.
Thank you much indeed, Mrs. Bilder. Next, we have Miss Kruk. 1 minute, please.
Pani Przewodnicząca.
President, while we are working on the strategy between the EU and Africa, we should first of all define the problems which we want to and which we can solve together. If the strategy is to be something real and not just beautiful words and harmful stereotypes, we must put it in a real context and address Africa's problems. One of such particularly important problems is the fact that tourism, which has collapsed as a result of the current crisis, is a very important element of the economy of many African countries. That's why, as a matter of priority, we should work out measures to restore safe tourism between Europe and Africa quickly. Another element that we should consider is the problem of the stability of African democracies and transparency of electoral processes. And in this context, we should have more understanding for the local circumstances. Let us not fool ourselves that we know better what the Africans need and how to make them happy, or that our model of liberal democracy is the only correct one. Let's not underestimate the specificity of the African communities and their cultures. Thank you.
Kiitos kollega Kruk.
Thank you, Ms. Kruk. Next, we have Mr. Botenga. 1 minute, please. You have the floor.
Yes. Kollega Botenga, teillä on puheenvuoro.
Mr. Botenga, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair, Madam Commissioner. Does the European policy for vaccines, is it racist? This is a question I asked when I saw this map that effectively shows that this year Europeans could be fully vaccinated while Europeans will have to wait several years. Some people are going to die needlessly because a vaccine exists and it could be produced in Africa. But when the WTO and Africa asked for the right to produce this vaccine, the EU said, no, this vaccine will stay in the hands of Western multinational pharmaceutical companies. The same colonial powers that refuse Africa the right to produce the vaccine, this is a very symbolic action. The EU prefers to save multinational companies rather than saving the lives of young people. Thomas Ankara said that we need to choose between champagne for the few and running water for everyone. Well, we need to choose between profits for a few multinational companies or the right to access a vaccine for all. Let us make the right choice. Thank you.
Kiitos kollega Botenga.
Thank you, Mr. Botenga. The next speaker is Mr. Falca. 1 minute, please.
Mulțumesc, doamnă președinte.
Thank you, Madam. Colleagues, I welcome the adoption of the new EU-Africa strategy, but given the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the risk is that inequalities in Africa will grow. And that could lead to a decrease in food security, which is why the pandemic should be an opportunity to build a more resilient society. We need to renew our economic trade and energy access relations. I insist on access to energy, and development of human resources needs to be at the centre of the strategy so that no one is left behind. Priority should be given to education, employment, the fight against poverty and economic development. I'd also like to mention the fact that it is vital to make sure that we can guarantee a correct political environment and a stable society.
Kollega Falka. Ja nyt sit...
Thank you much indeed, Mr. Falka. Next, we have Mr. Pisapia. He is joining us from Milan. You have the floor. 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Mandela said that poverty is not a natural state. It is created by man, and then it is strengthened by daily choices. Africa often divides member states of the EU. For example, the attempt by national governments that give aid while at the same time close internal borders to limit migration in Africa. Blocking migration is not only morally unpleasant, but it is also inefficient. We need to combat underdevelopment, hunger, but closing borders will not stop the causes, nor will it fully stop migration. We have mentioned China's neocolonialism in Africa. Our policies should have as its goal development and democracy. Let's show it with facts and not words. Thank you.
Kiitokset kollega Pisapia.
Thank you, Mr. Pisapia. Next, we're going to Dublin. Mr. Andrews, you have the floor. 1 minute. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam President and Commissioner Upperleinen. I visited Sierra Leone on 2 occasions during the Ebola epidemic, and like many people, I tried to learn the lesson of that experience, particularly in terms of health system strengthening. Unlike COVID, Ebola virus disease is not very transmissible and is not airborne, but is far more deadly. Of the 30,000 people that contracted the disease, 10,000 people died, and it affected all ages indiscriminately. The lessons were clear. We have to tackle the dangerous and airborne viruses if they are as deadly as Ebola, and be prepared for that. We must strengthen health systems, and we must prepare for the impact of loss of biodiversity. But very little was done. Reports were built up. Now, COVID is a wake-up call, and we are here again. And the manner of our response will define our relationship with many African countries for a generation, despite the ambitions set out in this excellent report by my colleague Chrysula Zacharopoulou. The ambitions in this report stand on their own merit, but it will be for nothing without an ambitious EU-African vaccine partnership. Thank you, Madam President.
Kiitos kollega Andrews. Ja nyt...
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Next speaker is Mr. Bardella. 1 minute. Thank you very much, Madam President. Green growth for Africa. This is what we're talking about in Brussels. Whereas China is showing itself to be more offensive vis-à-vis Africa. Extra 2 billion people in Africa, they will be there at the other side of the Mediterranean. Africa is and will always be a major economic partner, and we will need national, international strategies. We shouldn't be guardians. We have similar destinies. But the aid we give should be conditioned by being able to control migratory flows from Africa. We know the causes in the developing countries, the countries these people leave from. So yes to co-development, but not to guardianship. Thank you.
Kiitos kollega Bardella. Ja...
Thank you, Mr. Bardella. Now we have Mr. Zoffo.
Lui è Luca Attanasio.
This is Luca Attanasio, Italian ambassador murdered a month ago in Congo, while the Italian government and Prime Minister Di Maio did not care. But despite the fact that the EU showed indifference, this happened in one of the richest areas in Africa. These new neocolonialist strategies of China and Turkey are affecting Africa, and they are using the migratory flows as ways to keep us hostage in the future. We're going to have to face that uncontrolled immigration and terrorism are only two of the dangers ahead. We need to have a common approach to Africa because they're at the doorstep of Europe. And now that the EU has decided that Italy cannot be marginalized, and rather we need to be at the center, such as Spain and France, to stabilize the Mediterranean. Well, then the EU needs to realize that the south of Italy is facing Africa, and we need to invest so that it doesn't become Europe's refugee camp. Thank you.
Paljon kiitos tästä.
Thank you much indeed, Mr. Zoffo. Now we have Mr. Peter van Dalen. 1 minute you have. Madam President, in many countries in Africa, there's no rule of law. Young people leave because they have no prospects, and we also see human rights being infringed upon. Over the past few decades, lots of migrants have come from Africa to Europe. But let's not forget, the young people of Africa, they had no future. They had to leave. I'm thinking about what we could do as far as green energy is concerned. Let's also not forget the role of China. China's taking all of the raw materials from Africa. It's fishing everything dry in the oceans around Africa. So we have to be resistant in the EU and provide alternative policies. So I would support, therefore, this new European Union EU-Africa strategy. Thank you.
Kiitokset, kollega.
Thank you much indeed, Mr. Van Dalen. Now we have Pio Francesco Maiorino. You have the floor.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. The new EU-Africa strategy proposed by the Commission stems from the idea of promoting a change of approach in the relationship between us and the African continent. This is a positive fact because we go from development policies based as aid to cooperation between partners in an equal partnership, needing to face common challenges such as climate change, energy policies, work, the right to movement, peace. And how will we do this? Should we carry upon us the recent past where we condemned this continent to suffering and paternalism with this obsession of blocking migratory flows? No, we need to leave that behind. We need to leave behind our colonialist mentality, and we need to change. Change means a new model to build both the environment, the economy, and society. And this also means that we need to find a different way to look at migration without fear, and to consider the respect of human rights and inalienable right in as we create new and cleaner policies. Thank you.
Kiitokset, kollega.
Thank you, Mr. Maiorino. Next, we have Francisco Millan Mon. You have the floor.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. The African continent should be a priority for the EU. It is our geographical neighbor. We have several historic, human, and economic links, but we have a great economic disparity and also a great demographic difference. We need to place Africa at the center of our attention with words and with facts and actions. Hopefully, the EU-Africa 2021 summit will contribute to this association that we are speaking about. It is crucial to create employment for this young and numerous population that is going to join the workforce. European investment and intensification of trade need to contribute to the development of the continent. But development also requires security and overcoming conflicts. I hope that the European Peace Fund will help African countries to overcome great challenges such as terrorism, for example, in Sahel. Mrs. Zaharopoulos' report insists, and with reason, on the importance of Sahel as a key region for our African neighbors and on the southern shores of the Mediterranean. Thank you.
Kiitokset kollega
Thank you, Mr. Myanmar. Final speaker before Mrs. Urpilainen is Mr. Sean Kelly. You have the floor.
Commissioner, things are slowly coming back to normal. I'm the last speaker of the night. Great. So, while the summit between Africa and the European Union had to be postponed, nevertheless, dialogue must continue because we must build a close cooperative relationship with our friends in Africa. This must be based on trust and shared values. And together, we must tackle shared problems such as climate change and the pandemic, both of which do not recognise any borders. This makes a durable and robust economic relationship between us all the more vital. This will be particularly important for Africa's youth, as it houses one of the youngest populations in the world. Efforts to reduce poverty, as well as promoting education, training and skills, will help provide a new set of opportunities for these people, and they and the world will be better for it. We have no time to waste.
Kiitos kollega Kelly. Ja nyt sitten tämä
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And finally, we'll hear